Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the AI Monetization Podcast. I'm Binny, the co-founder of Project Pro. On this podcast, as you know, we speak with industry leaders on what business outcomes and use cases they are seeing with AI. Today, we have with us Arun Ravi. Arun is a senior director at Microsoft, focused on health AI. Arun leads product marketing, and GTM for multiple AI services that are specifically focused on healthcare inside Microsoft. Previously, Arun was at Amazon AWS, where he led the initiative on a couple of products at Amazon focused on healthcare, including Amazon Comprehend Medical and Amazon Health Lake. And previously, Arun was an entrepreneur where he founded and successfully got acquired his startup Mevoked, which is a digital therapeutic company focused on mental health. Arun, thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Oh, thank you, Binny. Very happy to be here.
Welcome. So Arun, given that you're super passionate about healthcare. You've been in healthcare tech and healthcare AI for most of your career. Uh, can you help us understand what is AI fundamentally empowering in healthcare right now? What aspects of healthcare?
So that's a broad question, but let's try to kind of focus it around. I think a lot of the work right now is in the physician space, the provider space, and one product that Microsoft announced recently was Dragon Copilot, right? Where we're basically taking a physician-patient conversation and automating the process of taking all the interesting information from there and creating a clinical note. Now, when that clinical note is created, what it does is it takes the burden off the physician from actually manually typing while they're talking to you. The reason the note is important is, at least in the US, a lot of the reimbursement is based on what's in that note, the diagnosis, any sort of treatment, any sort of medication that's prescribed. So capturing that information is super important for, the physician or the hospital getting paid. So the accuracy is important. So, obviously the physician needs to focus on that, but also needs to focus on the patient. So being able to, take that burden away from the physician and create that perfect note that they can send into the electronic health record really elevates that burden. And so that's a product that, I think there's a lot of obviously AI involved, and there's a lot of things that can happen with that note. But yeah, I think that's one example.
Got it. And in your current role, like focused on health AI, what are some different use cases that you kind of focus on, other than the kind of the clinical use case that you just mentioned right now?
Yeah, so one of the services that my team owns is a de-identification service, and what it does is it extracts PHI from clinical notes and it surrogates it. So then it replaces it so that it's kind of hidden in plain sight. So the reason why we think the service is powerful is because it allows researchers to test LLMs. You can do a lot of machine learning without worrying about PHI being leaked. You can create newer models on it, and essentially everything is shifted thoughtfully so that it can be used kind of as the data for these LLMs. And I think like one huge aspect, as I'm sure you know, is like getting the right data to build these models is super critical to kind of getting those use cases to be solved. But other than that, I think one area I'm very excited about is agentic AI and just kind of like what can happen in terms of like different agents interacting with each other to kind of basically remove the burden on a lot of the staff in hospitals and in payers, for example.
Okay. And Arun, given that you've been an entrepreneur before, you've
Mhm.
tried selling medical technology as an entrepreneur, and then you do a lot of GTM in your current role. What are some insights from doing GTM at Big Tech that you wish entrepreneurs knew? Because
Mhm.
Big Tech do GTM really well. It works very well for them at scale. So, what are some insights there that you think other entrepreneurs knew early stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think understanding the kind of the flywheel that you need to get into to scale is something that has been built at in big tech, and understanding how you can potentially expand on that or build on that. So let me give you an example. So just say you want to build a new add-on for Teams, right? Let's take Teams as an example.
Mhm.
So there's something called App Source on Microsoft where you can actually build a plugin on Teams, and you can actually get customers to download that in your teams and use it, right? So that's like kind of a go-to-market motion at scale that you have now, right? Because it's been, already set up by Microsoft.
Yeah.
Azure Marketplace is an example, right? Can you actually scale your solution through Azure Marketplace to all these other customers that are already using Azure? I think that we're, as a startup, I was so focused on making that point of sale, like that selling to the hospital, right? Selling to that provider, that I forgot about the scale motions that existed, and kind of focusing, I would say, like focusing on a one-to-many opportunity
Mhm.
is something that Big Tech has obviously done very well. So kind of plugging into that motion is something that I wish I had known earlier.
Got it. Got it. That's a fair point. And, at least on the limited knowledge I have, is it a fairly straightforward process for startups to plug into these ecosystem of marketplaces and stores that Big Tech have?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how well developed some of these startup programs are across AWS and Microsoft or Azure, for example. It's just that like a lot of startups don't have visibility into it. So like, as an example, we have a program in Microsoft called Pegasus, where they take startups that have a certain amount of ARR, and they put them into this program. They plug them into all the monetization opportunities within Microsoft. We have a venture arm, M12, M12, that you can plug into. Like, there's a lot that can happen.
Yeah.
It's just, I think a lot of startups don't get, they want the credits to build the tech. They don't realize that some of these, investments
Right.
that these companies are making, they want you to become the next Netflix, right? They want you to become the next Lyft. I mean, that's how AWS built, their customer base over a period of time, is investing in these startups, and Microsoft is doing that a lot as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different opportunities. It just takes a little more effort to find them. But yeah.
Got it. So earlier, you mentioned how you're excited about the potential for agentic AI, right? Could you maybe just help us understand some potential powerful use cases of agentic AI that you see really helping?
Absolutely. So one use case that honestly has been rattling in my head quite a bit, to be honest, the last few weeks is, when, just say, we have this patient, physician visit, and then a note is created. Now that note has to, be coded, in the sense that they have to take these codes in order to put for reimbursement. Now, once that happens, that has to be filed with the payer, so you get reimbursed for it. So what if there was an agent from the provider that interacted with the agent from the payer automatically to get those reimbursements done in real time? And if there was some sort of clash, saying that, hey, these codes don't match what the payer is going to do, that's when the human in the loop can come and review and say, like, okay, what's going on? The reason is that, claims are, way behind, like, because there's so many visits that they're going through, right? And so many things that they need to code, and a lot of it's done manually. By the time they file it, it's almost 30, 60, 90 days after the actual visit. And then the payer may say, hey, this is not legit. I'm not going to take this because maybe you've upcoded, or, this is not the right codes based on the diagnosis and the medication. Then it goes back to the provider, and the provider doesn't have any context. He's like, I mean, I don't remember. This was 3 months ago. Like, maybe I don't know who that patient was, or I haven't seen that patient again. Yeah. So if those things can happen in real time, that could be super powerful. I think the biggest thing is creating that human in the loop, so that the more complex cases can get resolved quickly.
Got it. And in healthcare, when you think of ROI and outcomes, what are payers or clinicians or patients mostly focused on? Is it time? Is it cost? Is it accuracy? How do those things stack up in terms of priorities?
So I'm going to be, I mean, this is the AI monetization podcast, so I'm going to say it's going to come down to revenue generation, right? I mean, no matter how we think about the healthcare system, the thing is that it is a fee for service. I mean, that's how a lot of it. Value-based care, it is very important, and there are different incentives, but you're incentivized to keep the patient healthy, right? So there's different parts of the cycle that you can put AI in. But if you think about, like, very clean, look at Dragon Copilot, just coming back to that example, what does it do? Taking the time off a physician to actually, write the note and spend time on that means they can see more patients. Yeah. Seeing more patients means more revenue, right? So, like, in the end, you can say cost savings, but that tends to, take slower time of adoption. But if you can, impact the top line, you get a lot of adoption a lot sooner. That's my honest opinion. That's what, if you look at it from that perspective, just based on my experience.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And the other thing, Arun, is that, from my limited experience developing AI solutions, right? It is, I mean, based on the use case, it's fairly quick and straightforward to get to a 70% complete or a 70% accurate solution. The last 20, I mean, the 70 to 90% or 95%, and that takes a lot of iterations. So in a
Yeah.
highly regulated, mission critical industry like healthcare, what is acceptable? I mean, is it 95%, 99%? How does that vary based on use cases?
That's a great question, and honestly, it really depends on the use case. But I would say this, that like there's a certain amount of iteration that
Yeah,
you need to do for a product. But if your product does not fit into the workflow of your users, it's not going to get used. Like, so for example, physicians, at least in the US, are used to the source of truth. Everything is in their electronic health record. Anything that takes them away from the EHR has to have like massive value for them to do it. Otherwise, they're not going to do it. So I think, like, no matter how great these solutions you create
yeah,
are, bells and whistles, if it doesn't fit in the workflow, it's going to be extremely difficult. And so that's one of the things that I think companies now are focused on and doing a good job. I mean, even with, like, I mean, as an example, Oracle acquiring Cerner, an EHR vendor, the last mile problem of connecting to the EHR is so hard that it doesn't matter what you build. If you cannot do that last mile problem, the adoption is going to be very, very, very low.
I see. So
Okay.
for those people listening who are kind of uninitiated into healthcare, and EHR, is that like a CRM in the healthcare space?
Yeah, it's an electronic health record. Yeah, it's like basically the source of truth. It stores, all your clinical notes, anything that a physician interacts with, mostly anything that a physician interacts with. Maybe
Yeah.
pharmacy systems may be different, is all within the EHR. Orders, everything is in there. And so Epic, Cerner, Athena Health are like three of the top EHR vendors. And I mean, they tend to be very, interacting with them has to be through a certain process. It's gated. There's a lot of requirements and, standards that are required to do it. So because of that, making sure you solve that becomes super important.
Got it. So for a company to integrate into that EHR workflow, it's not as simple as an API call. There's a lot more.
It's not. Unfortunately, it's not. I wish. I mean, what the best advice I've got from a VC in healthcare is, like, if you can make healthcare as easy as ordering an Uber, then you've solved the problem, right? We haven't really got there yet. But hopefully with a lot of these advancements in AI, we will.
Got it. So one of the products you worked on was with Nuance. I think.
So yeah, so I mean, so the Dragon Copilot was actually, an iteration of a Nuance product called DAX, Dragon Ambient Experience, which is again the ambient conversation. So
Yeah.
Microsoft acquired Nuance, and so post that, there was, we were created into one org, and so I was on the Microsoft side of healthcare, and the Nuance, and we kind of joined together. So Dragon Copilot is primarily coming from a lot of the assets we acquired from Nuance.
Got it. And at your startup, Mevoked, am I saying it right?
Mevoked.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
So the focus there was on mental health. Could you maybe just help us understand the customer, the problem, and the solution that you were?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty passionate about mental health. I've had two friends commit suicide in my lifetime, and it's like been very hard thing to deal with. And so, like, I had the opportunity to start a company in behavioral health. So it's a very interesting story. I was looking at the impact of, like, kind of the internet and technology on people. And this was, again, 2010, 2011. And we realized that if we tracked, like, how people were using their devices, we could figure out when people were going through, good emotions, bad emotions. And we built a kind of very basic algorithm to track that based on online, mobile, and social data. And so when we saw, people going into kind of a negative loop, we interacted with them. We would say, hey, go take a walk. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. So kind of real-time interventions that were very easy to kind of follow. So what's interesting, what happened is that around the same time, my wife gave birth to my oldest and my son. And so, I gave the solution to her, for postpartum, and it worked extremely well. And so then we realized, hey, there's a lot of these acute care episodes that happen that can cause behavioral health issues, like postpartum depression is an example, or having stress after you're being diagnosed with diabetes, or the tension you get going through chemotherapy, that we can provide a 2 to 3 month program that tracks you. We went and licensed a cognitive behavioral therapy program, which was the intervention. So that was where the clinically validated interventions that we could push. But then at the end of that, I mean, it's a loaded term now, but back then it was very new, digital therapeutic. You could then, assess the state of the patient and say, hey, this person is mild to moderate, they're fine with, the current program. This person is more severe and they need to get more help or go see a therapist. And so the program was to basically help funnel that. But it was a very interesting journey. We worked with Mayo Clinic. They're one of our investors. Launchpad Digital Health was another. Had really great experiences, but a lot of learnings, a lot of highs and lows, as you can imagine with the startup.
And was this primarily a consumer product which people signed up for, or would you sell it through the institutions and hospitals to patients? Like
any way possible. I think we tried, at that time we were trying the employer market, for employees, because if, when moms went on maternity leave and came back, if they had postpartum depression, there were impacts of that. There was a lot of studies being done on the cost and, postpartum depression leading to more, regular diagnosed depression, or stress and anxiety. We actually went to birthing centers to give the program to moms after, because they were very invested. We went to therapists that were helping with postpartum depression. So everywhere. I mean, we went to a direct to consumer. We tried to do a B2B2C. Also in the US at that time, there are 4 million live births in the US, 2 million are Medicaid. So Medicaid, helps a certain population. So we're trying to go to government programs as well, because they had a lot of money associated for behavioral health. So there was different paths that we're looking to monetize.
Got it. Okay. So, one of my personal power use cases for ChatGPT is really almost like a personal coach or therapist or somebody whom I can talk to for decisions and things like that. That's probably 60-70% of how I use it. But I'm wondering, do you know why there has not been like a killer app or a killer product in that space with GenAI, like how we have on software coding or customer support? Or am I missing something, or is there a fundamental reason why nothing's there right now?
Actually, funny enough, on CNN there was just an article saying, "Hey, can a bot, like a Gen AI bot, help you with mental health?" Like it's a very good question, right? I mean, I think people have tried to automate that process for a very long time, even before this whole LLM explosion happened.
Okay.
I think the thing about behavioral health, to be very honest, is that it's a progression. It's a process, right? And there's a lot of like lessons, a lot of inner work that we need to do in order to get to where we want to do. And sometimes it takes a lot, and there's so many life circumstances that take you away from it. So I think it's a combination of the bot can only take you so far, and I think that as people we sometimes feel more comfortable talking to another person. So it just depends on the age, the issue, and a lot of things. But I really do think I do think that the Gen AI approach to mental health will relieve the burden for a certain population extremely well. We just have to identify what that population is and make sure that they can get access to it. If you take someone in a rural part of the US, for example, who has access to nothing, this is a great first line of defense against mental health issues. And I think like being focused like that will help like kind of the adoption as well.
Got it. And if you were starting up today, which area or problem in healthcare would you focus on as an early niche to solve?
To be honest, I mean, mental health is a passion for me, like I've told you, and I think that area is very interesting. I still think what we were trying to do at Mevoked can be done better. I still think mental health is very broadly looked at. There's a lot of work being done in more severe mental health issues, substance abuse, schizophrenia, things like that. I think it requires a village in those cases, but I do think like, especially post-COVID, with the younger population, there's a rise in mental health issues that I think that GenAI can help. And I don't think a lot of companies are working on it. I haven't seen one kind of rise to the top. So I'm wondering like, what is going to help that push? So I'm very optimistic that there's, some levers that have to be tweaked or something that's brought into it that allow that to kind of elevate. So that's one area I'm very excited about. Just kind of shifting gears a little bit, radiology. I think AI and radiology is very exciting, right? Because there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of things that can be done. There's a burden. There's not enough, for example, radiologists in rural America. Like there's things like that need to be improved. There's a lot of outsourcing of it, which is fine, but I think there can be a lot of efficiency there. So early diagnosis, right? If you can get an image done fast and you get AI to give a diagnosis and get it verified by a radiologist, can you get people into therapy sooner? I think that is super exciting. The third thing, and I'm going to hit on this, the agentic AI. I still think there's a huge gap between the technology and using it. And someone needs to fill that. Like everyone, like now everyone's talking about MCP, everyone wants to talk about agentic AI. That's all there. It's great. It's amazing technology, but using it, getting it from like, hey, this is how I use it, to this is how I deploy it, to more importantly, this is how I pay for it, and this is how it's going to be paid, is still kind of lacking. But agentic AI, I think, has like a ton of potential down the road.
Okay. And why do you think that gap exists between the pace at which this tech is coming out and the application of it? Like, what are some of the things that are contributing to that gap?
I mean, the pace is insane, right? I mean, I think we're like, I don't remember of time that we've seen this much of, technology just come. And I think that it's also, I mean, over a period of time, our attention spans have also become quite, smaller in terms of like, oh God, do we need to do this? God, do we need this? Because like, everyone wants to stay at the forefront of technology, but sometimes like the basic stuff needs to be solved, right? And I think there's a gap there. Second thing is that I do honestly think that the technology is moving at a pace that is going beyond the users that need to use it. So as an example, take ChatGPT. Like, my dad's a doctor, for example, and he used ChatGPT. He's interacted with AI in different ways, but this is the first time that AI has been brought to natural language, right? Like where he could naturally query what he wanted and get an answer back in natural language. It was not SQL. You didn't have to like do any crazy searches, right? That sort of barrier needs to be broken with a lot of this technology. And I think if that's done in a cost-efficient way, that'll automatically, kind of increase the adoption. But I just think things are moving too fast, and people are like, just, stay the course. Sometimes, I mean, you're a startup founder. Sometimes you need to stay the course to see something through before you actually jump on the next thing. Because otherwise, like without focus, and especially with the product, you need, and I think Paul Graham said that you want 10 users that cannot live without your product, then 100 users that are just kind of using it. Find those 10 users and then iterate at scale, right? That's basically.
Great point. Same thing. And I like every time I come across something new with AI on LinkedIn or X, I bookmark it. And then every few weeks I go and delete everything I've bookmarked because I haven't had a chance to read them. And there's all this new stuff that just overrides all the stuff that came up last month. So it's just been a constant running in the same place to stay there.
Yeah.
The other thing, Arun, is, in your role, right, you're out there talking to a lot of, patients, doctors, payers, etc. What are you hearing from them in terms of their aspirations? What would they like to see, their biggest challenges? What are some of the important things you take away from those conversations?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Like the challenges that they're facing are so far removed from how quickly the tech is evolving, right? Like, I mean, their challenges are, in some cases faxes, right? Their challenges are like getting, if you get a referral, just say from, to a neurologist, getting the data from your clinician to, this next one is a big issue. Like, so for example, my youngest son, had to see a cardiologist at a children's hospital, and then went to the pediatrician, and we told them about it multiple times, and the pediatrician's like, oh wait, he went, why did he go? And again, like these are like interoperable, like we're not even getting the data in the same place, right? Then what's the point of AI, right? Like you're going to have blind spots. So I think that is the data part, the interoperability, the access, like has to be solved at a certain level. That's why I think that the AI that focuses on the workflow, and sorry, I'm a person of three things, and I always like try to focus on the 3 points. The workflow becomes so important, because once you alleviate the pain there, everything, they have time. It's almost like, to your point, like if you have more time to become, like AI gives you a superpower. Now suddenly you have 40% of your time available. What are you going to do with that time? Like you may, as a physician, you may say, hey, I'm going to start looking for clinical trials for my patients in real time. I'm going to use AI to do that. Hey, I'm going to use AI to see, like, maybe, I'll check the symptoms or something, or I want to check the imaging, or I want to get more data, whatever it is. You have that time to do it. And I think that's where we need to go incrementally before we kind of take a big bang approach, right? I mean, these big bang approaches never really work in the long term.
In the specific example that you used, which is, in scenarios where doctors are referring patients to each other, where faxes are still being sent, and
Yeah.
that hasn't moved to, I don't know, email or whatever else. Why do we think they will make the leap to AI?
I mean, incentives, right? I think like in the end, like, I mean, again, like I said, my dad's a doctor, my brother's a doctor. It's a very noble profession, but like it's built on economics, right? I mean, in the end, hospitals are, need to create revenue to exist. So revenue is dependent on seeing patients. The more patients you see, the more revenue you get, right? It comes down to that. So that is a core, no matter what. The improvement in patient care is also, obviously, that's why they became doctors, right? In order to improve that, and improving that in a way where the next time, especially if you have a chronic disease and you keep seeing the same physician again, seeing improvement is obviously, that's what the physician wants. I mean, they're treating you to get better, right? And so in the end, if the technology can help with that, you will see adoption. But again, it has to tie into their incentives, like, or the incentives of the organization.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? I mean, hospitals are going bankrupt. I mean, if you look in rural America, so this is an example of AI working really well. Like, just say children's hospitals, right? There's only very few in the country. A lot of the, if you're in a rural part of America, you may not have a children's hospital. You may have a pediatrician, but they're going to have to refer you to more severe cases. AI can really help play a role, right? If all these cases are in an LLM, just say in a therapeutic area, take oncology, right? And all of these, take leukemia, for example, all the cases are put in an LLM that's shared across all children's hospitals. That data is given by all children's hospitals, and every rural pediatrician in America can have access to it.
Mhm.
Just think how amazing that is,
Yeah.
right? It just takes the coordination of that to do that. And every physician would be on board with this, right? Because it is really alleviating, a pain in an age group that we want good to be done, right? We want, these kids to be cured. So I think there's a lot of places. It just needs to tie to the right incentives. And to be honest, as a startup, like, again, big tech has the ability to invest in these things. As a startup, to be honest, the VCs need to see the long-term vision of this and really look at the long term. So this is the part where the monetization is not necessarily that critical in the beginning, but
Yeah.
over a period of time, it could be monetized in a very profitable way. And I think that early phase of getting the stickiness of the product can help with that.
Got it. And you kind of stressed on the concept of workflows a couple of times, right? Could you maybe just help us understand an example workflow, like a simple what's an example workflow in healthcare?
Right. So let's take again. We start from the patient physician visit, and then let's assume that I don't have any AI. So let's just take a simple workflow. So, like,
Yeah.
I'm talking to you. You're coming for, just say, flu symptoms, right? So as you're talking, I'm like, hey, I'm looking at a different screen, and I'm basically typing as I'm talking to you. Sometimes I'm turning here, but I'm turning back to enter all this information into this. So I have to focus on this so that I put the right information. If there's previous data, sometimes the physician has time between visits to look at it, but if not, they're looking at your previous visit and they're also asking you, hey, you came a week ago, like, what changed from that? So again, they have to capture that information, because if the information is not captured properly, they have to. So that visit goes on for 45 minutes, right? Then, the doctor's like, all right, here, take, here's what do you call, a script for aspirin, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go to the pharmacy. They put the order in. You have to go to the pharmacy and pick up your medication. So you do that. Now, after that visit, I'm maybe finishing up my notes. I may not have time because, we finished right at the time. The next patient is ready to come in
Yeah.
to close this, and I have to say, finish the note, right? Then what happens is that I go to the next patient. I go to the next patient. Just say I have a very busy day. So I haven't completed notes, just say, on the 8 patients that I've seen that day.
Yeah.
Now I finish at 5 p.m. Now I have to stay till 8 p.m. to finish all my notes. Remember what happened. Maybe I put some, shorthand, because doctors do that a lot, where they put a lot of shorthand to help remind them what happened. All that has to happen, and that happens after I work. Then I put it into the EHR. Now, once that's put into the EHR, the coder, sometimes, some of that's automated, you have to code it. But then it goes to a medical coder who has to code that. Now, the coder has to take out the ICD-10 codes, all the different codes, put it into a claims, and submit the claims into a revenue cycle management system. And then that goes to the payer. But that process, I mean, as you can see, like, how much time they're spending after the visits is insane. And I think some of the more, I guess, like, like emotional things that we've seen from physicians, like, I finally have time with my family because, I don't have to do all this paperwork. And doctors are people too, right? Like in the end, like they have the same emotions that we have and they go through the same ups and downs. So I think that's a simple, like very focused area, but like, if, as you can imagine, any administrative task in a hospital is very burdensome. There's a lot of work, a lot of manual work there.
That is a very detailed, thorough walkthrough of that workflow. And like you said earlier, one of the primary challenges is that this can't be a point solution or a standalone solution. It has to integrate into whatever that thing the doctor is seeing on the screen, that software is, which is like a EMR. But what are some other challenges of taking AI solutions to production inside healthcare?
Let's talk about, so like when we talk about healthcare and life sciences, I don't want to leave out pharma and payers, right? Because I think that one thing about AI that you see, like some of the early adopters of the cloud were actually pharmaceutical companies, right? So I think it's also super important to remember that, like, yes, we're speaking about providers, which is one part of, one piece of the puzzle. But if you look at real world evidence, for example, or you look at care benefit management for payers, there's a lot of other use cases that LLM adoption can happen a lot quicker. So I don't want to like make it seem like it's, the workflow is so hard and to get in. There's a lot of other opportunities in pharma. So to your question, I mean, is it okay if I focus on like some of those other other areas as well? Yeah. So like, I mean, I think if you look at real world evidence, for example, like I take a drug is produced and a drug is, FDA approves it, patients are taking it. You still need to capture a lot of the adverse drug events to that, right? And it's called the phase 4 of the drug after post release. A lot of that is based on the EHR data, right? And so, I took an aspirin and just say I develop a rash, right? Now, you want to track that information over a period of time. Number one, because you want to see how well your drug is doing in a population over a period of time, depending on the drug. But more importantly, you have to report back to the FDA in case there are some adverse drug events that you did not capture during your clinical trial. And so these are things that I think like LLMs can like be amazing with, right? I mean, you just put the data in, you can ask questions against it, query against it. You have all this patient data that's available. You can de-identify it so like it's more focused on the signs, symptoms, and the actual condition, because you don't need to know the patient per se. You just need to know they're taking the medication. So these are some really interesting use cases. Drug manufacturing, like again, like, protein folding, there's a lot of things done there, again, with LLMs that I think are super, super interesting. But I think the hard thing is going from the AI output to the clinic, right? Going to preclinical, clinical is still, that's still a, you still need to create, right? You still need to create the drug or create the components in order to test it. Those are super interesting areas. And clinical trials, I mean, is again another area that I think could be super interesting for LLMs in the pharma side.
Exciting times ahead. Do you
Yeah.
do you have like a contrarian take on how AI will play out in the next couple of years?
I think that we now have like Dr. Google on steroids, right? I mean, I think especially with LLMs, I'm just worried about like, so there's two things. I'm worried. First of all, like we don't have enough data, right? I mean, we've already harvested so much data, right? Now what's happening is the data that will really help improve these LLMs are in silos, right? They may exist in hospitals or pharma companies may have them. So like, again, like these LLMs may not have all the data that they need. So that's why I'm a big, fan of like, SLMs, right? Creating, very focused language models, because those are very cost efficient as well, right? To deploy them. So I think like getting to that sooner is something that I hope happens, because I don't, mistakes will happen, right? I mean, and the thing is that with AI, as it becomes more pervasive in your day to day, you become more dependent on it, right? And if you become more dependent on it, you tend to make more mistakes, right? And you just don't want those mistakes being made in the wrong scenario. So that's something I worry about. The second thing is, I mean, again, this is more operational, but the cost, is cost going to hinder adoption, right? Are we going to realize that it's so expensive and Javon's paradox, that obviously efficiency will improve, it will go down, yes, but what is that timeline for that? Like, are we on that path, right? Is something that I kind of worry about. So the adoption cycle could not be, may not be as quickly as we hope. I try not to think about AGI and then that sort of dystopian kind of future, because I'd like to believe we're more practical and rational than to kind of adopt that. But another thing just came in my head is just, how do we test these models to make sure that they're, that, I mean, I'm not edge cases, but like they work, like medicine is repetitive 98% of the time, right? It's not like a house, episode every time a patient and a physician, visit, right? But at the same time, like, how do you create the consistency around these models and the right guardrails, right? I think guardrails is going to be super important. So are companies thinking about that as they're deploying? So that's, another area that, I think is super interesting that, that we should keep track of.
Got it. So in a world where AI will start getting good at doing many of these workflows, AI will get very good at predicting diseases, analyzing images and radiology and stuff like that.
Mm.
What roles do you think will be preserved for humans in pharma, medical, that'll be solely human purview that they would do well in?
I mean, I think like in the end, like, I mean, these models will provide an output, but the human still needs to make the choice, right? Like in the end, I still think that's going to be very important in healthcare. Like see, the thing is that it's also important to at least, in the US, like if any of these models provide a diagnosis, that has to be FDA approved, right? And so then it goes through the regulatory cycle. So there's a certain like limit that these models can anyway operate just based on the regulatory and compliance framework that we have currently. So that's one thing. I mean, my hope is, so for example, I'm Damasi out of Tufts. He's a professor that talked about the cost of, a drug. And back when I was looking at his papers, it's like $1 billion in 12 years to create any sort of medication. I mean, just think how quickly we can, make those cycles happen. Not to take away from, like, I'm curious to see, like, can we create models where we can test medications, where we can see the impact, so we can, reduce the time between phase 1 to 2A, 2B to 3, and get these life-saving medications out sooner, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in the end, like, I'm just seeing an acceleration. Not the people still need to be there to capture the information and do that, but just seeing these processes happen sooner, so we create, at least in pharma, more life-saving drugs. Like, that's what I would like to see. In the provider space, can we get patients to better manage their diseases? Like some of the basic things that we suffer in healthcare in the provider space is, patient absenteeism. They don't go to their appointments. People don't make appointments till it's too late.
Yeah.
People don't take their medication. They split their pills into two. Like we're dealing with like basic issues that still require, AI is not going to solve that, right? So in the end, like, can we help people be healthier because they're seeing the, the ability, I don't know, maybe AI takes the burden off some part of their life where, they're able to do, the quality of life improves, So I think like you have to look at being healthy from different perspectives. Maybe they make better food choices. So things like that. So I still think the humans in this whole process is going to be super critical. I just think that AI is going to play different roles, and how it plays a role is going to, impact that overall like longevity. But like in the pharma side, the cycles, can we go faster? Can we be more efficient? I think that's going to be super exciting in the future.
Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I personally really wish that AI would make significant impact in preventive health, rather than people, and kind of to your point earlier about mental health as well, which is behavioral motivation and nudges before things actually go wrong, to get you back on the right track. And that would be very powerful.
I think so. And I think like, especially like, I mean, like just take a simple example. Like, I mean, people are getting colon cancer much sooner in life. Like, I mean, usually the requirements like, hey, get a colonoscopy at 45, right? Now they're getting it at 30 and 35. Mm-hmm. So like, it's a consequence of our eating habits and, processed food and everything that's happening, right? So like, everyone is getting, and I'm sure like, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people within my age group die a lot sooner. Like, I mean, heart attacks, this, that, like things are happening a lot sooner than we've seen previously. So you're absolutely right. I mean, are there images we can do, right? Like, I mean, can you get your calcium score sooner? Like, I think a lot of the requirements that have been set in like a lot of these healthcare manuals and all that, everything needs to be, revisited. And I think AI can play a role of like just at least like giving the like, to your point, a preventative view of it, to give the onus on them to say, hey, I need to do these tests to be healthier, because a lot of these things are happening sooner. It's crazy. I'm like, I don't think people realize how many people are getting diagnosed with diseases that we've seen happen much later in life. And that's kind of scary, right? I mean, from a lot of different ways, in a lot of different ways.
And just one final question, Arun, is that given that you're passionate about healthcare, you work at a place like Microsoft where you have tons of resources, and you're kind of brimming with tons of ideas on what all can be solved. But then you're an owner of a couple of products, you need to focus on a couple of things. How do you trade off between what you need to focus on and all these things you could possibly do with your resources? And at big tech like Microsoft, how do you gauge product market fit?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think like I've taken some of the processes, obviously some of the stuff I did for my startup is some of the, the processes I've learned at Amazon and then what works well at Microsoft. So I think I'll kind of piece that all together. So it may not be like a perfect plan, but I think like I'm a very big fan of the PRFAQ process at Amazon. I think writing the PRFAQ before you write a line of code is super, super important. And I know you had Bratin on, so I'm sure he would have said the same thing. But it
60 minutes talking about just the PRFAQ.
yeah, exactly. So like the advantage is that it lets you really focus on what you're trying to build, the why and the how, right? And then you write customer testimonials before you even get it, right? So like you're kind of like trying to think from the customer lens, like why would I want this product? Why would I use it? What benefit do I see from it? One thing I get my team to do is build a very back of the napkin P&L, right? What are your cogs, right? What are you actually, kind of building? What could you charge for this, right? And a competitive analysis as well, right? So like you have a good idea of what you're actually doing, depending on if it's a 0 to 1, or a me too, depending on that kind of product. Once you have a PRFAQ and you guys are aligned, then going to the next step of like saying, okay, this is how we're going to build it, right? MVP, that's when the startup mind comes in. You build an MVP good enough. You want to make sure the compliance and security is there because you don't want to make sure you have issues at scale or issues. You don't want to rebuild things, right? So and the good thing about big tech is there's a lot of reusable components, processes in place, but then you basically get that MVP into private preview. Now, private preview is basically you get a set of customers, you set an exit criteria, you test it with them, you hit your exit criteria, you feel like, okay, I feel this is going to get somewhere. I feel I have enough customer feedback to say that there's a product market fit. I mean, it won't be perfect, but there's enough stickiness that this will bring benefit to the company. Because the one thing I'll say, like I learned this at Amazon. Someone said this. We're all stockholders. If you can increase your margins, right, or reduce your cogs, you create more profitability company, you create more top line, you're benefiting the company, right? So like thinking from that perspective, irrespective of where your product fits in the overall ecosystem of big tech is I think very important. Then once you gate it at private preview, you go into public preview. You go into public preview means you have a pricing strategy. That's when the Microsoft kind of wheels come on, right? Like you get marketing support, you get go to market, you look at the channels to sell, you get it in front of sales, and you get all of that kind of ironed away. You get like support set up, and then you go through and you have like this excellence process in Azure. I mean, depending on Azure service or where, and then you go through that, you tick all the boxes, and then you basically GA. But I think like where the most important thing is that in private preview, you have to be okay knowing like failure is okay. It's okay not to have the right thing. Course correcting is totally okay. I think we fall so in love with our products that we want to see it go through irrespective. Sometimes you have to be like, this may not work, or I have to pivot this way. So that private preview part, I think, is like probably the most important. 2 parts: PRFAQ, private preview. Those are the most important parts to figure out. Once you figure out the product market fit or what you're going to launch, in big tech, at least the scale motion is there. Once you get pit, it's like it's like a tidal wave. You'll just go with it. But I think that early part makes a big difference because you don't want to be like 3 years out where people are questioning the premise of what you did. Right? It's better to put the work in earlier.
Yeah. Spending the time on just kind of make sure you're pointed in the right direction makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But in the startup, it's different, right? Startups, you need to get out of the building, start iterating, really get feedback, because your feedback cycles are much faster. With big tech, it's like the liability is higher, right? So like that's the thing you have to unfortunately balance.
That's very helpful, Arun. On that note, thank you so much. This has been very insightful.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Binny. Thank you so much for having me.